Very good. Well, thanks for coming out this morning. We've got exciting things, as always, in the city of Anchorage, and we're proud to talk about a couple of those today. First, just a little bit of budget information. We last night introduced to the Assembly our first quarter budget revisions. The highlight of the budget revisions are the fact that we've been able to confirm that at the end of 2014, we have about a $7 million surplus, which is unspent revenues from the previous year. This allows us to do some things that we try to do every year, and that is pay for one-time expenses in the 2015 budget, which we know are going to occur. In this particular case, we'll be focusing on our police and fire academies. The equipment that they need to hold these academies is very important. We also need to backfill some positions for the SAP project. And we're looking at a pilot program with the folks at Schick-Shadle Hospital in Seattle, which if you've flown on Alaska Airlines over the last number of years, you see their advertisement where they use aversion therapy techniques to cure addictions of alcohol, drugs. Highly successful program. And we're looking at trying something a little bit different with those in our homeless population that maybe have a substance abuse problem, are willing to try to go through a true cure. This is different than the 12-step programs that we traditionally see, and quite frankly, we're willing to try something new. So we're putting together the details of the program. We don't have much more information now, but except for the fact that we do want to put some funding into our budget so that as the program comes together, we'll have that opportunity to see if we can do something a little bit different and maybe more successful than some of the things that we've been putting forth up to this point. The revised budget is actually includes about a 2.9% increase in property taxes compared to 2014. But because of the fact that we've had a bunch of new construction and evaluations have gone up, it actually means a savings of about $10 per $100,000 of home value, or on an average home of $300,000, about a $30 savings, because again, we broaden the tax base with all the new construction, and of course valuations are up a bit. So we're pleased about that. It's a good story for the taxpayers and a good story for the community with the growth that we've seen, particularly in the commercial sector. Commercial enterprises don't come to a city unless they feel that it's a viable economic opportunity for them, and a city that both in public and private sector have good rules, regulations, so allow them to flourish and employ people in our community. So we're pleased about that. But the highlight of today's press briefing is we're really pleased to announce that our book, From the Shores of Ship Creek, written by Charles Wohlforth, published by Philip Todd, is now available. And this is a significant piece of work for Anchorage in its centennial celebration. When we first started planning the centennial celebration several years ago, we wanted to make sure that it was culturally, socially, educationally significant for our community. And our partnerships with the museum, with the school district, the downtown partnership, Visit Anchorage, have culminated in many, many different community events. We wanted to make sure that there were events that lived on, and the movie Anchorage is one of them. Our website, anchoragecentennial.org, which is an interactive website where you can download your pictures, your stories. We want to capture from everyone in Anchorage their personal story. And then finally, the book From the Shores of Ship Creek, which Charles Wohlforth has brilliantly written. I won't go into a long description of the gentleman I'm going to bring up next. They're well known in this community. Charles, of course, a former Assembly member and renowned author. Flip is the leading publisher of all things Alaska and Anchorage in his many years of being a publisher. So Flip and Charles, if you'd like to come to the podium, and I'll turn the mic over to you. Flip has got some prepared remarks, and Charles, of course, will talk about the process that went into creating this great piece of work. Gentlemen?
Mr. Mayor, before you leave, we'd like to present you with this special bound edition of From the Shores of Ship Creek, I think.
Oh, wow. That is beautiful.
We had the bindery that put the book together, create this box that it came in with gold foil stamping, etc. To
Why don't we take a quick look at Bryce and Susan, and we'll get a good, nice picture. Flip on and tight here. There you go.
1, 2, 3.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That is awesome.
You're most welcome.
Now we'll get out of the way and let you gentlemen.
It's an honor for Charles Wohlforth and me to be able to present Mayor Dan Sullivan with this special hardbound version of Charles' book, From the Shores of Ship Creek, Stories of Anchorage's First 100 Years, which Todd Communications published with a little nudge from the mayor and the municipality. We had a custom bookbindery add a few special features, including the gold foil stamping that you saw and some other things that make it, we hope, to be a keepsake that you will treasure for a long time. This book is the result of the contributions of dozens of people, ranging from all those interviewed by Charles to editors, proofreaders, photo and historical researchers, book designers, and the printer, who did a magnificent job of reproducing the old black and white and more current color photos that were used in the book. Mayor Sullivan is an appropriate recipient of this history book, in part because his family has been so much a part of our common Anchorage and Alaska history since before the gold rush in 1898. His great-grandfather on his mother's side of the family, Hugh Murray, was a ship's captain from Portland, Oregon, who brought supplies to canneries in Prince William Sound, beginning in the 1880s, long before the gold rush. On his father's side of the family, his grandfather, Harvey Patrick Sullivan, arrived in Skagway from Minnesota during the gold rush in 1898, and with four brothers climbed the Chilkoot Trail, floated the Yukon River, and eventually ended up in Nome, where he panned for gold on the beach there. He also had a horse and mule-drawn drag line, which he used on the bluff south of Nome to continue to accumulate enough sand in the winter that he could pan it all summer. His grandfather on his mother's side of the family, Dan Egan, came to Fairbanks in 1908 from St. John's, Newfoundland, after walking from Valdez to Fairbanks. He mined Fairbanks Creek at the now-vanished town of Meehan, 22 miles northeast of Fairbanks, where his mother grew up. His mother, Margaret, who many of you may remember, who has a park here in Anchorage named for her, down by Westchester Lagoon, was born in Fairbanks, and it is said on the ride back to Meehan, fell off the sled, and it wasn't noticed for a while, and so they had to go back and find her in the snow in her swaddling clothes. Grandfather Dan Egan of Meehan was co-owner of a store there, ran freight sleds and wagons pulled by dogs and horses into Fairbanks for store supplies, picked up the mail contract and other commercial freight, as well as cutting and selling cordwood. He also became a U.S. Marshal, and I'm told by the mayor's older brother on occasion would deputize one of his children and have them accompany him on his trips outside to take prisoners to the lower 48. I mention all this because these family entrepreneurial skills may serve our mayor well, as I understand he'll be unemployed shortly. Anyway, this is the official kickoff for the Anchorage Centennial Book from the shores of Ship Creek, which is already in more than a dozen stores in Anchorage, and we expect it to be in several dozen more. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm Charles Wohlforth, as the mayor said. I'm an author. I've written more than 10 books, and have been in Anchorage all my life, like the mayor, and also for a long time like Flip, although he didn't start out here. And I guess to start out with, I'd like to thank some of the people who are involved in the project, to thank the mayor for the municipality support, Susan Duck in the mayor's office, who worked on all these centennial projects in Flip. And then also at the Alaska Humanities Forum, which was the entity that was contracted to work with me as I was creating the book. Nina Kempel's their director, and David Holthouse was an enormous help in developing the concept of the book and working through the book as I was working on it. Also, you'll find that the book is very richly illustrated with photographs, and Alaska Dispatch News was kind enough to open up their archive and donate use of those photos to the community for the book, and which is something they've never done before, and essentially allowed us to use anything they had, going all the way back to the Anchorage Times archives, which Anchorage Times, of course, was founded right at the beginning of Anchorage. So we have photos covering every era, photos from the museum, and also from a really interesting woman named Mary Berry, who knew some of the very earliest people in Anchorage and who still lives here. And she has a huge trove of photographs in her house, many which are original photos by Sidney Lawrence, and so we were able to use some of those as well. So for me, the opportunity to write a book about my hometown, its history, was a tremendous honor, and also a huge challenge, because how do you capture all of Anchorage? How do you capture whatever is the spirit of Anchorage and what's unique about our town in one book? And how do you make it accessible to everyone? So it's not, a list of dates and names, and it's not something academic or dry, but it actually comes alive and that you want to read it. And so the idea we settled on was to focus not on, the chronological events so much as the people who were here. And so the book is broken into 14 chapters, and each chapter focuses on an individual who lived here at that time. Some are already very famous, and some you've never heard of, and the contributions they made and what it was like to live here at that part of Anchorage history. And through the course of doing that research, even though I've lived here all my life, and I've written books with Governor Wally Hickel and Dave Rose, who was one of the founders of the Permanent Fund, and Vic Fisher, who was one of our founding fathers of Alaska, I learned a lot. I learned all kinds of crazy stuff that I didn't expect. And I put it in the book. And the people who've been reading the book have told me they learned a lot too. And some of it is, we're old enough now that we can deal with some of the funny, embarrassing, weird things that happened in our founding. And some of it is just great stuff about how we came to be the city we are. And some of it's never really been written about, the way our town became the way it is now because of this battle between the old borough and the city and where sewers were going to be built. And the war over sewers lasted forever, and it's why our town looks the way it does. And I don't know that anybody ever talked about that. I learned about Blueberry Lake, which is a lake that existed not that long ago, which is now the site of National Bank of Alaska and Barnes & Noble. And if you drove up C Street, headed south from Anchorage, you ran into a lake, and you had to cut over in Fireweed Lane to get around it. So that was not that long ago. That was like in the 1960s. So we're a really young city, and a lot has happened, and stuff gets forgotten, and it's really valuable for us to look back on that stuff and remember it and have it in print and to share it together. So I tried to write the book at a level that everybody would be able to read. I think a middle school kid could read and enjoy the book, and I think an adult would enjoy it even more because of the characters are in it and the events are in it you're going to learn about. And to do it in such a way that it's not long or voluminous or get boring, and that you could actually take these chapters out and use them in a classroom if you were teaching about Anchorage. And I'm really proud that it's come out the way it has. And I have to thank the characters, the people who contributed. People who contributed to their life stories to the book, but then also contributed to the city and making it what it is. And I'll just pull out one person in particular who's I really enjoyed knowing, Frank Reed. He died just a couple of years ago. He was the honorary chair of the Centennial because he was going to be just over 100 years old when the Centennial came. And he'd lived here from the very beginning of our city. And he'd been involved in everything that happened here. And just had a rich and interesting life, and was totally a delight to the end. And I remember talking to him, and the subject of his age came up, and he said, I've been involved in everything, and I've done everything, and so if I don't make it to the Centennial, that's okay. I've had a fantastic life. It's totally warm and funny and happy, and I'm sad he's not here, but I think that kind of the spirit of his way of looking at things is hopefully in the book, and he's one of the people who's profiled. And I think you'll learn a lot from the book and from learning about people like that. So I'd like to open it up for questions for any of us.
Anyone, any questions? Yes.
You said that the book is available right now. Where can people go to buy it?
They can go to Barnes & Noble, Tidal Wave, Cabin Fever, Mosquito Books at the airport, the museum, Anchorage Museum.
And online.
And you can also go anchoragecentennial.org and order books. And I think so far, when we have had the opportunity, like at the movie at the Beartooth, people are very interested in it. It's a hit. Any other questions?
Is there a particular incident that you wrote about in the book that comes up in your mind as like, wow, that was really amazing?
Yeah,
to find out.
Let me
you
step
know?
into the microphone. There were a lot of them, but one that I've told over and over again because I just think it's so funny is this conflict that existed between the Forest Service and the railroad, Alaska Engineering Commission that was building Anchorage in the very beginning. All the land we're standing on now is part of the Chugach National Forest. Went all the way up to the Matanuska River, and so the city was laid out. And the Forest Service didn't want to give up any more land for the city. And so there's a conflict between the Forest Service and the Alaska Engineering Commission about who was running things and giving up the land. And the director of the Forest Service came in the very first year of Anchorage, was highly critical of what was going on here, especially all the prostitution and bootlegging. There's so much alcohol and people were having way too much fun. And some of them were in the National Forest. So he sent his people to kick him out. And then the people who were running Anchorage figured, hey, this might be a good angle that we could work on these guys. And so they kept pushing the red light district out into the National Forest. And they finally did and meanwhile they're saying we need more land. So their final ploy was moving the whole red light district down to basically Chester Creek in November. The railroad hadn't been built yet. The only way to get here was a dog sled from Seward. The port was closed in the wintertime. And the agent for the Forest Service writes back to Washington and says, well, all these women are down there, and it's impossible for women to travel in the winter. So they're here. So what we need to do is exclude this whole area from the National Forest, because then it won't be embarrassing to us. And that went through the whole process, the bureaucracy, and they ended up excluding 900,000 acres, which is the whole Anchorage Bowl all the way down to the peninsula, like a huge part of the land we live on, became public land because of this ploy having to do with the red light district. I just thought that was hilarious. And I found the confidential memos where they're writing back and forth and talking about this.
That was great. Anyone else?
Mayor Dan, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Are you going to, have you made any endorsements? Will you make an endorsement for the mayor's race?
Yes, I have. I've endorsed Ms. Dembowski. Had the chance to work with her for the last couple of years during her tenure on the Assembly. Previous to that, I had appointed her to the Budget Advisory Commission, and she is just this very diligent, hardworking young voice for Anchorage. And we've done a lot of good work over the last 6 years. We're probably in the strongest financial position the city has ever been in. I invested more in our infrastructure than at any time in our history, and I just want to hand the torch to somebody that I think is going to continue that good work. So I formally endorsed her.
And just a follow-up on the property tax. Can you explain, I know you talked about it earlier, but how this new plan is going to help property owners with the budget?
Yeah, because of our expanding economy, we have a lot of new commercial development, an increase in residential as well. That broadens our tax base, which means we're collecting from more people, which means each individual property owner has the opportunity to see a slight reduction. It doesn't mean every single property is going to see a reduction, but the average will be about $30 for average home. So again, pretty good news for the taxpayers. Yes.
Mayor Sullivan, I know that, I'm sure the whole book is a pretty special thing to you, but any particular part that you're fond of, anything you really enjoyed reading?
Well, I think Charles included a chapter about the most recent elected officials in Anchorage history, which would be myself and Mr. Begich. And, for me, that's like current history, which, he did a really good job of kind of capturing our different philosophies, but at the same time, two people who, having spent most of our lives, he was born here, I was actually born up in Fairbanks, but, all my formative years from when I was 8 years old, our perspective on watching this city change over, the last 50 plus years and how, despite our, maybe political differences, we really share a common love of this city and really put our heart and soul into making it a better place. And so I enjoy that chapter. Yeah, that's it.
This rehabilitation program that you talked about earlier, would that
Yep.
be in Anchorage or?
No, it'd be in Seattle. Schick-Shadle Hospital is located in Seattle. We actually have any number of Alaskans that have used that services. Either, I think our Department of Corrections at the state level actually has a relationship with Schick-Shadle. But what we're finding is, oftentimes the treatments just aren't taking, if you will. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes people get back into the same environment, and it's hard to maintain sobriety when you go back into a similar environment. So one of the things we're looking at is taking some of the folks that are at Carlick Manor who've already shown a reduction in their drinking and maybe are ready to, completely withdraw from alcohol abuse. And it costs about $22,000 per patient at Schick-Shadle. But when you consider what we're paying to, pick up people constantly on the streets for, when they're passed out, and the cost of maintaining, the various programs, it actually might be a pretty efficient way to maybe get people once and for all out of their addiction into sobriety and onto a new lifestyle. And of course, part of that, as we've talked about before, is they can't go back into that same environment. Housing is a component of when they come out of the treatment. We want to make sure that they're in a safe environment. And again, so there's talk about maybe Carlick Manor becomes partly a non-drinking facility as well. So those who come out of the treatment have a place where, again, they're not surrounded by other people abusing alcohol. So it's got potential. They claim a really high success rate, and we got to try something different in this town. So, very good. Thank you all very much for coming. AnchorageCentennial.org, all the merchandise you see, plus the amazing book available online and at the various stores around town.